We're here to help you navigate your business growth with strategic conversations and insights from experts in multiple industries. Welcome to Wayfinding Growth.
This episode of Wayfinding Growth is brought to you by Sprocket Talk. Now, if you're ready to take your HubSpot experience to a whole new level, you need to join Sprocket Talk as a free VIP member. That's right, free. Tutorials, courses, training, HubSpot updates, and so much more. Head to sprockettalk.com/WG to join the movement and get an exclusive Wayfinding Growth deal.
Welcome, Wayfinders. I'm Remington Begg.
And hey, I'm Dan Moyle. We're so glad you're here. On today's episode, we are uncovering how we help clients grow with goal setting. That's easy to say, right? So Remington, what did you get out of this discussion today?
The big thing that kind of reaffirmed, and it's something I'm going to bring back the team in our inbound stand-up here in a minute, is that we really need to make sure that our strategies are not based in lies. So, slicing things up, whether it's asking deeper questions about a goal and getting the buy-in from the client, or whether it's defining the goal to a point where there's no question about things that need to happen in order to make it happen, are paramount.
Communication.
Yeah. What about you?
The thread for this episode to me is trust, and how you build it, how you keep it, how you nurture that. The phrase you used was a partner at the table. That's how we see ourselves, not a vendor, a partner at the table. And that takes trust, and how you brought that back at the end. So listen for that thread throughout the entire episode. Yeah, man, this is good. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Excellent. Here it is, friends. Season 2, episode 19. Let's set that course for growth.
Woo!
Remington, welcome back to your session. Lay down on the couch and let's talk. So I want to talk today about goals. I love the idea that you can't improve what you don't measure. If we don't have goals in mind, you said it before about whether it's keeping score. How do you get to the end zone? How do you get your home runs? Whatever that looks like. How do you get the puck in the net? If you don't keep score, you don't know where you're going. So I feel like goals are critical for businesses. How would you describe that goals to journey of growth relationship?
Yeah. So goals are huge. The problem is that it's almost too buzzwordy nowadays, right? Because you have different types of goals. You got personal goals, professional goals, department goals, personnel goals, revenue goals. There's a lot of different ways to slice it. And I'm a big traction fan, and traction talks about right people in the right seats kind of thing from a human point of view. But when you think about it, they also talk about the that big hairy audacious goal, and then the rocks, and then breaking it down to all the nitty gritty pieces, if you will. And so we've adopted more of this KPI, key performance indicator, or OKRs for objectives and key results, because your company can have a goal or your department can have a goal, but the individual people that are in that department need objectives that would help accomplish that. So I almost look at it as slicing the goal up into manageable pieces.
So it feels kind of like goal is the big picture, the big idea, and then we get into everything else. We could go one of two ways with this. We could talk about ours as a company, but I really want to get into how we work with clients.
Yep.
Whether the listener is an agency person, or whether they're working with customers themselves, or however that looks. Maybe they're just thinking about it in their own company. But I think if we talk about with the client side, that might help.
Yeah.
So how do we begin to set goals with clients? What does that look like?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So we strive to be a partner at the table rather than a vendor. Because with that comes communication around a goal. And it's really important. So it's easy for agencies, and I'm not speaking holier than thou from our agency point of view, but it's easy for agencies to define goals that they believe are important for the company, or they assume are important for the company, that isn't backed by data or backed by buy-in from the actual company that you're working with. So if you think about it as an agency or a vendor, our goal is to retain the client, right? But if you think about it as a as a seat at the table, our goal is essentially your goal of what you're trying to do if you are a client. And so with that comes a whole bunch of trust from the relationship. And then in addition, there's that business acumen and really trying to slice up and understand. So I'll give you an example. We have clients that'll say, we want to grow. As an agency, I could say, great, thanks for giving me your goal.
Right.
But in all reality, it's not smart. It's not specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, or time bound, right? That's the SMART acronym. Yeah. But when you start thinking about that, what are the areas that we can affect that growth? So let's say it was growing by 30%. That's still not enough. We need to know like actual numbers, right? Or like what departments do we want to grow, or how things tie in. So when we start thinking about the OKRs and how that conversation's going, and we've been making a transition to this, I'll call it more of like a methodology rather than just goal setting, is understanding the goals fundamentally and then slicing them up in manageable pieces that understand where the key indicators are that we are achieving the goal before we actually hit it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get into OKRs here in a minute. I want to get pretty specific on that because I love what we have and where we're going with it. So we'll get into that. But you said something, Remington, about trust.
Yep.
Being a partner at the table rather than, quote, just a vendor. How do we at Impulse Creative build that trust with someone, and when do you know that you have it?
You never fully have it. You could lose it in any given minute. You've got to do what you say you're going to do. We got to make sure that the clients understand what's happening. Audrey in an episode talked about communication, right? And that communication is huge because we could be absolutely killing it. And if we're not communicating the fact that we're absolutely killing it, it could eliminate the trust between the organizations. On the flip side, be the first to say it sucks and it doesn't work. Because if you just are cruising, you're cruising for a bruising, right?
Yeah, right.
It's really one of those things where you have to focus and really like understand where the client's coming from. And, in a perfect example, like we went through one of our own audit meetings and we were like, wow, we have to change some of this stuff, right? It wasn't bad, but it was like, that hurt a little. We should make this smoother. So, the trust, I think, is gained from as much of how we make them feel, and then it was all the way through just following through on what we say we're going to do. And a lot of that starts with asking the right questions.
And I love the idea of being self-aware. That's a thread through this entire season.
It really is.
Right? Be self-aware and don't be afraid to lead that conversation. Like you said, hey, this sucks. This isn't working for us. I don't think this is working for you. Let's question this. That episode, by the way, that Audrey talked about communication is season 2, episode 15, just a couple weeks ago. So go listen to that. I think that's something that I learned from that conversation that didn't connect the dots until just now when you talked about trust. Communicate in the way they want to be communicated with. So that just that simple act of, yes, we hear you. Yeah. If we use Slack a ton, but they only use email and phone calls, well, we don't want to make phone calls all day long, but you know what? We're going to make some.
Yeah.
So those little things add up to a big amount of trust, right?
For sure.
Do you think it takes, so I mean, this maybe, I don't know, this isn't necessarily related to OKRs and setting goals, but do you think that it takes a lot of little actions to build trust, but it can take one little one to break the whole thing?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And it's not what you always think it is too. So like perception versus reality, right? I think it's dangerous in the agency world because we're doing a lot of repetitive tasks for a lot of people in a lot of cases. So like might be a handful of clients we're working on where we're doing similar things for that are working really well. And we know we did it because we did it. But the perception on the other side that it was done, like there's got to be some kind of feedback loop about that. And if you think about, I talked about this the other day with my wife. We ordered food and it took a really long time. And Rachel said, I wonder if you even put the order in. Right? Like, and that's like at its most basic level, like something we can really kind of dig in and think about there, because did he even put the order in? Of course he put the order in. Wait, but did he? Right? Like we start to doubt things, and where the proactive communication in that example, you know, I think it was like 30 or so minutes before we got our food, which usually double what it should be in a lot of cases for most restaurants. But if he had come 10 minutes in and been like, hey, I want to let you know I put your food in, but the kitchen's a little backed up right now, we would have graciously taken that extra 15 minutes and just not cared. But because there was nothing said, we started doubting, right? So it's like a super simple example, but it's one of those things that I think is really important. And Audrey actually unpacked that pretty heavy from a project management standpoint, but from a trust point of view and from even indicating the goals, it was a pretty amazing thing.
Well, and it just, we fill in the story in our own heads, and
right.
we are negative creatures.
Yeah.
Like you have to understand that. Yeah. I mean, I try to be positive, but I mean, we really do. Like I can see sitting there at the table thinking, did he even put the order in?
Right.
Like, does he remember that we're here? Like,
right.
Yeah, we fill in those negative stories. I like what you said too about the feedback loop and goals. How critical, I mean, maybe that's a dumb question to ask it that way, but let's just unpack about how critical it is that feedback loop is connected to your goals. I mean, tell me about that. We should be doing that, right?
So like the goals are tough though, because the goals could be like a 12-month, right? You're not going to wait 12 months for me to tell you how well we're doing. Right. If you're our customers. So that's where the OKRs come in. But I explained it this way, and I know I'm stealing this from someone, and it probably was a book, but I don't remember exactly where. So we'll have to dig. It's in Tetra, so I'll figure that out. But how I try to explain like the customer experience is like when we're saying, hey, we're going to help you get to this goal, is Dan, we're going to get in the car and I'm going to blindfold you in the driveway. and I'm going to start driving, and we're going to have the windows up, and I've got to tell you where we are. Otherwise you start imagining that we're going to like Timbuktu and I'm going to dump you in an alley. Right. Like, right. So if we're sitting along and you're blindfolded, imagine that client experience. Like, you know that we're going to a ball game, and you assume the path, right? But if you're like, oh, there's usually two lefts and then a right, and then suddenly I turn right before that first left. Now, suddenly your assumption is that we're going the wrong way, even though you may or may not have seen that traffic, or you may or may not have seen, the things that were going on. It's my job as the driver in that scenario to communicate what's going on. And how can I tell the story so vividly that you know what's up, so you don't feel the need to pull that blindfold off. That's essentially the agency-client relationship right there. And
so is an OKR sort of that atlas then, or that mapping software?
Yeah, it should be.
GPS?
It should be. Actually, absolutely. I love actually tying that into the GPS. It's, the OKR really should, so objectives and key results, right? So you have your goal. Let's say it's growing revenue by 30%. Let's just say that's $1 million. That's a big ask. A lot of individuals might have something to do with that. Maybe sales has to do something, which they would.
Yeah.
Maybe marketing has to do something. Maybe customer service has to do something. Maybe it's like retention has to be there.
Right.
And so if we look at the objectives and the key results, like each of those departments would have their own objectives to help accomplish that. It'd be like close a certain number of deals, and then marketing has create a number of opportunities, and then service has reduce churn by X in order to hit those numbers, right? So all those numbers add up to that goal. The OKRs really start to define it, but the objectives and then the key results is the key part of that. Is, so we have this objective, but how do we know that we're succeeding, right? And so going back to that example, I said a left turn versus a right turn. A left turn is what I'm expecting, and you want me to go right. If you don't trust me because I said, hey, we're going to make a right turn, your body is going to be thrown off when you expect to lean one way versus the other.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's that those key results are a big piece. Like, hey, in 1 mile, we're going to turn left. Hell, the GPS does it. They do that for us. So we
Right.
know it's coming up, you know? And I think there's a lot of lessons there in regards to, it's obvious to us, we know our way, but if someone isn't able to see that path, like we have to not only blaze it, but then we also have to define it for them so they know where we're at.
Absolutely. So let's get into OKRs. So OKR stands for objectives and key results.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that is proprietary to Impulse Creative? Is something that we kind of have learned to use? Where did this start?
It's probably one of the like 27 books on performance that I've read.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit of all of it. And I know Google, we've got a Tetradoc that has like the definitions of it. And I want to say Google has a method that they kind of outlined, because they're obviously a very results oriented company with how large they are. And they've come a long way in regards to organizational growth. Well, and everything. But when we think about objectives and key results, it's really kind of just defining the goal further. Like if I say, what is your goal to a room of people, I'm going to get a lot of different answers that are probably not going to be in any one or two types of buckets. You know what I mean? So that's where it really kind of comes in, and it's important.
And so walk me through what an OKR kind of feels like or looks like, or how it should be.
Yep.
You know, I mean, for viewers, you can see us, but we're not sharing a screen, obviously. But for listeners, like, how would you describe what an OKR document should at least begin to look like for a company?
Sure. So document could be different things for different people. Right now we have it in a spreadsheet because we're very tactical in regards to the response that it needs. I'm not convinced that it needs to be there. You know, we've had a couple, like Doug Davidoff's episode talked about, obsess about the destination more than the path. We made a big pivot in our OKR document based off of that. Like, aha for me was like, holy crap. Like, we need to make sure that the destination's really painted in a really good picture for that communication. If you got in that car and you didn't know where we were going, how much more angst would you have than if you did?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so as an organization to be able to come together and understand like their piece of the pie, it's really important. So we have it in a spreadsheet right now. We break down our OKRs, or objectives and key results, into quarterly objectives. So you could have a year-end goal of that, $1 million in business, for instance. But then we also are going to have other things that can tie in regards to like how do those slice out? And so what we try to do is we try to look at objective, right? What are the objectives to hit that goal on the quarterlies? Like what are the big bucket pieces? And then how do we like go one step down, and how do we slice that up into a couple more manageable pieces? And then we usually go like 2 or 3 steps further than that. So for marketing, you could bring it to a campaign level. For development or for sales, it could be optimizing a process point of view. But the most important thing is you have to separate the key results from the actual tactics, because if they overlap, it's going to be problematic. Because that overlapping that can happen is where you're going to run into a lot of friction points. Because if you come in and you're working with your team and they're working on one piece of the pie and you're working on another, if someone does their job awesome, they should be able to measure it. And so when we think about the objectives, it's like a family of key results. And so the easiest way that I explain it, and I could be explaining it wrong, is that we essentially dig in to, let's say we're going to create a pay-per-click campaign for acquisition of new customers. That pay-per-click campaign for an acquisition of new customers, it should have a goal to it, right? Or the objective. And so the objective is not create a pay-per-click campaign. The objective would be generate 200 leads from pay-per-click in the next 5 weeks. So when we look at that, then we know, okay, so we know what we have to do. Like at a high level, we're going to be hanging out in the pay-per-click tools. We know what our numbers are that we have to hit. And then we get to slice that up into, so key results. Well, in order for us to hit our numbers based on calculations, we're going to need X amount of clicks. And in order to make that happen, we're going to need X amount of form submissions.
Mm-hmm.
In order to do that, we would need to have this conversion rate on the landing page. And so what we can do is say that conversion rate, we'll know that conversion rate, whether it's on or off, as soon as we have a handful of traffic, like clicks and leads that come through. Where if we only had the goal at the top, we're like, yeah, we're on track, or no, we're not on track. So the key results is a key piece, because that's like the indicators of success that light up that objective on whether or not we hit it or not. And emotionally, there's a piece there. If you just have nothing but tactics and you've got this big, hairy, audacious goal, let's just bring it back to like a yearly goal, like a lot of companies go after.
Right.
It is hard to know whether the left or right turn is necessary if you're not viewing the big picture. And at the same time, it's really hard to communicate how far along the journey you are. I mean, imagine your GPS that didn't tell you what time you were going to arrive at your destination.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's essentially the same kind of concept there. And then the tactics just go into, we have to complete these 45 things in order to make those key results happen.
Gotcha. And a year is a long way off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I've heard people say, I don't know if it's just today now or if it's been for a while, but like a 3-year goal is just a dream. You can't really plan that far ahead anymore. So even a year is a long ways away. How often do these, is quarterly enough adjustment time, or should these be broken down even further? Like, how do we do that with our clients? Are we meeting every week, every month, every quarter to make adjustments?
So it depends on the organization. If you're small and scrappy, you could be looking at it daily if you've got enough data. I think the journey that's happened is we start at, like, when we didn't have, like, there's more data flowing through the internet, like, per day than like historically there was like per decade.
Right.
I mean, I actually looked at a study and it was something very, very close to that, probably worse. But when you think about the data that, and like, how do we achieve the goals? Like, I think the 3-year plans are incredibly important, because that's where you start tying into vision about where we're trying to be when we grow up.
Great.
And this is personally or professionally. The 1-year plans, like, you should be able to slice that 3-year plan into what 3 things have to happen in order for me to be successful. And it's essentially your yearly goals for each year, if you think about it. And then you have to slice that up into, people can get paralyzed by fear. Have you heard that term before?
Yep.
So you can get paralyzed by fear when you're like, oh my God, I have to make $1 million at this company. Right. But if you go, well, that's only $250,000 a quarter. And our average product size is $10,000. I only need 25 customers a quarter, which means I only need, I'm doing math now. I only need 8, right? I only need 8 a month.
Yeah.
And so as you start slicing that down, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I only need 2 a week. Like, you know what I mean? So it just makes it so the team can be more aligned, and also gives you those indicators. If you didn't get those 2 that week, this first week, it means you got to get 3 in the next week. And it just makes it so that we don't beat ourselves up with that analysis paralysis. And it lets us know whether we have to pivot or bob.
It's a great in-depth word picture on OKRs. That was really good. So let's back up and let's look at Impulse Creative. What kind of shipwrecks have we had to navigate when it comes to OKRs and goals with clients?
Yeah. So not having them is probably one of the biggest ones. I'm excited because people will know about it by the time this comes out. But Julie is on our team. We're bringing in a strategic role for the retainer team to really kind of focus solely on that and on the team building. And that's the tricky thing about goals. It's one of the most important things, but it's one of the most least materialistic things of a client engagement. And it's the responsibility of both sides to communicate it. Right. So a perfect example is a customer not telling us that they hit goal, or us as an organization not telling the team that we're on goal in regards to like on track to where we need to be. Sometimes we get busy, and when we get busy, the stuff that matters is often the stuff that we put off to the side because it's like unspoken. And so we were defining goals like nobody's business with clients. We were hopefully getting buy-in, and I'll unpack that in a second, in regards to, you know, from clients and from an agreement standpoint. But then we were telling that story up front about what we were trying to accomplish, and we defined that path. And we worked on that path for 12 months. I mean, we had 12-month retainers, 12-month goals. Like, it just kind of made sense. And what we realized, and this is becoming more and more apparent, if the company pivots and they don't tell us that they pivoted, and we keep on with the same track, we're not on the same page. Like, those vectors aren't aligned. So that's one. The other is the age of social media and internet. Like, you do way back when, you do a 3-month campaign for, for direct mail. You do that direct mail, those direct mail postcards, you put that stuff in the mail, and you have all your scheduled sends. You can't do anything for 3 months. You have to let it play out, and you don't get the results to come back until after the 3-month picture, right? So when we think about like how digital's changed, that is the reporting cycles have shortened drastically. And so with those reporting cycles, and also our instant gratification society, we want to know what's up, right? And so as the agency's grown and as the clients have grown, we've needed to really have those better defined. And it's interesting that if we're not operating on the OKR sheets as a North Star, that's the easiest way for me to communicate it. The biggest issues we run into is that 12-month like goal. The further we get away from it, the further the more opportunity for error is in regards to whether we succeed or fail. And luckily, we were blessed at Impulse that like the majority have been successes. We've had some failures, we've had some misfires, like over a 12-month period. But where we've won is where those were more defined. And that was really last year, like September was like, all right, this is how we're doing things. And we're still on our journey.
Yeah, of course. That's the fun part, right? So let's unpack that. Hopefully getting buy-in. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing me back. Hopefully getting buy-in is kind of ties into the seat at the table conversation. So, client comes to us and says, we want to grow by 30%, and let's just say it's $30,000. Throwing a really low number just for easy math. And we go, sweet. And we look at their current stats of where they are, traffic, leads, customers, like, all of that jazz. And we come out with math about what we have to accomplish in order to make that happen. The company buy-in was that a generalized number that they gave us? Or was that an actual? That's step one, right? And I'll share an experience in a minute.
So the buy-in from Impulse into that's what we're asking?
Other way. Like the number you gave me, is that an actual number that you would like have on your balance sheet? Or is that a would be nice if number? Okay. Right. Yep. Or we had a client where we went in they didn't become a client because of this. They basically came in and were like, hey, we want to grow. Cool. How much are you looking to grow? Well, I would love to be X amount of revenue by the end of next year. Okay. Where are you at now? And so they told us where we're at, and it was like 150% growth year over year.
Wow.
Right.
Oof.
Okay.
All
Sweet. Right. So we messed up because we didn't say, what does your company look like when you double and a half your revenue? Right. We didn't ask that question because we weren't trying to paint a picture of the destination. So the client wants more revenue. Why does the client want more revenue? Because he wants more profit. Well, sweet. There's 45 different ways we could increase profit, Right. But if we're going towards revenue and we're going towards that type of growth, sweet. We're gonna look into that. We didn't unpack that enough, and the client gave that to us as much of an ego push as it was I want to see what you guys come back with. Right. It's like this agency play.
Mm-hmm.
So we went through and we built our entire strategy on the fact that he said he wanted to grow by 150%. And when we were going through and actually deploying and telling him about the strategy, of course, everything was 150 over his budget that he was willing to spend. Everything was 150 over over the overall areas. And when I unpacked it with him, and when he said he wasn't interested in moving forward, we said, okay, well, can we unpack why? And he goes, Remington, he goes, all of those objectives and everything you gave to us were gold. And I'm like, that's fantastic. So why aren't you moving forward? I can't facilitate that business. I couldn't operate if you grew my business by 150%. I would have to do so many things in my organization, and I don't think I could do it in a year and a half. And so your marketing plan can help me get there, but it's too much. And so there's a dramatic pause there, because while that was kind of screwed up that he went through and did that, I don't believe he did it intentionally. I don't think he realized that his goal that he had that wasn't baked out, and we didn't have and didn't give us enough opportunity for buy-in to question it the right way. And that's a lesson we've learned. We will beat a goal to death until we understand that the math is right. But it influenced an entire strategy. And so if we took that and we had an actual client relationship that was ongoing, if they came in and said 150% up, or let's just say they're not interested in growing that much, if we don't understand the fundamental whys and we aren't part of that conversation, if you want to grow by 150%, strategies are going to change if you want it in 3 months or 3 years.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
And that's really where it's important. So buy-in from the client is understanding the importance. And then it comes back to trust too, as well.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a rant.
No, fascinating, because and in my initial thought, when you said that's what he did, I was like, well, that's a jerk move.
Right.
Why would you do that? But then to unpack, well, it probably wasn't that. It was probably this, assume a positive intent.
Right.
Which, by the way, has become a mantra in my house between my wife and I.
Yeah.
We're using that all the time.
Love it.
But it is it's okay. So he didn't think about what that would do to his organization. We didn't ask. So now here we are kind of both going, well, we can't do it. So yeah,
it's our fault 100%, because we didn't dig in enough. We didn't we didn't deploy enough understanding, and we didn't paint the picture to him accurately about it. You know what I mean? If we had said, okay, so what does that do to your organization? And he's like, oh, well, I'd have to hire, this is how I explained it to him. I would have to hire 40% more staff. It's actually great. You're only hiring 40% more staff for 150% growth, right?
Right.
We should help him with a hiring strategy.
Yeah.
But it wasn't part of the conversation because we didn't dig deep. And so that buying internally about that goal is the holy grail, that's the North Star. And then the client understanding that it's a true goal is so paramount.
So good, man. So good. Goals, objectives, key results, KPIs, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Great conversation today about that. I'm glad that we're on that journey with our clients and for ourselves. And while it's not perfect, like you said, you're not holier than thou when it comes to agency life, but we're working toward it. So that's inspiring. Absolutely. Excellent, man. Hey, thanks for unpacking the Impulse Creative journey with me today. That was a lot of fun.
Of course, man. This is always great.
Awesome. We'll see you on the next episode.
See ya.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please share it. Post it, tweet it, gram it, email a friend. Give the gift of knowledge to someone you know that could benefit from it. And if you really loved it, please consider leaving a rating and written review on your podcast player of choice. And as always, go to wayfindinggrowth.com for resources and past episodes. Remember, we're here to help you navigate your business growth with strategic conversations and insights from experts in multiple industries. Thank you for listening to Wayfinding Growth.